Pursuit of happiness. It's hard to believe that we are halfway through this story about Chris Gardner. As we learned last week, his story starts out in the 1980s. And last week we learned in the book that he had this dream.
This part of my life.
Sorry about that. Could you go back? That was my mistake. I hit the wrong button there. So, there we go. Okay. So we learned last week that he had this dream of being a doctor. But due to money issues, that dream was cut short, and it led to marital difficulties. That leads to his wife leaving him. That leads him to staying and raising his son. But he holds fast to this dream of the red Ferrari. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, it must be all about the car. But here's the thing, it is not about the car, but what the car represents. The security that it represented, the feeling of happiness. No living paycheck to paycheck. No going from an apartment to living in a hotel to living on the street. His dream is financial security. And it's always been there before him. But before he can get there, he's got to go through an internship. Now we're going to watch the clip from the movie. The internship for Chris Gardner was his bridge. Now we all know what a bridge is. It's a structure that allows us to get from here to there. Or a configuration that represents where we need to go. Now I like the idea of a bridge because it represents the way that we can connect with God. Phil Berry, who is the columnist, one time took a picture of a billboard. He was traveling on a highway out of Texas on the way to Colorado. On the billboard, it read, "Last chance, Lotto, Texas, clean restrooms, snacks." And then right underneath it, almost as an afterthought, someone wrote, "Jesus is Lord." A pastor, commenting on about this, the picture of this billboard, said, "It's like on the way out of Texas, whatever you need, they have it. A little snack, a place to freshen up, a place to gamble, a little bit of Jesus, whatever you need, they've got it." At least Jesus is in there. Have you ever noticed how often Jesus is on the cover of Time and Newsweek? One time someone asked a religion reporter this question, and he said, every time Jesus is on the cover, we see a spike in sales. Jesus is commercially attractive. He is still popular with lots of people. He is a great example of a bridge people are looking for. We're going to share with you another story of where Jesus was a bridge, this time from our gospel lesson.
I'm going to be reading from Mark chapter 1, verses 29 through 39. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sunset, they brought him to all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. May God add his blessing to the reading of this word.
Thank you. People saw in Jesus a bridge. Now, have you ever noticed that a bridge only goes in one direction? About the only time I've ever seen it split is at a boat dock. But at that point, you still have to go in one direction or the other. Now, I suppose you could go backwards, but that's not the intent of a bridge. The whole idea of a bridge is to go forward. Now, on both of my trips to the African country of Ghana, I had the opportunity of walking on a bridge at the Kukum Forest Reserve. And so what you find here is you have these 6 bridges that take you out over the forest floor. They're about 1 foot wide, and it's rope, and they're just wood planks there. And and I looked it up. They're 130 feet above the forest floor. That's 11 stories tall. Now, on both of the trips that I went to walk on this canopy bridge, they're incredibly popular. Anyone that's ever been to Ghana says you got to go to the Kukum Forest Reserve. And so they're so popular that once you start, you can't turn around because there's so many people behind you. And because it's Africa, there's no ladders. So when you go out, you got to finish. Now, many of you know that I am deathly afraid of heights. And so as I was going out, I just kept going, okay, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 foot in front of the other. In fact, at the point, what I did is as I was grabbing the rope bridge, I kept thinking of that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Remember that when he kind of grabbed his arm around that rope bridge and then he cut the rope? I kept thinking, if this bridge is going down, I'm going to make sure that I'm grabbing these rope bridges here. Oh, there's one more thing I learned. When I came back to the United States, I also learned that this walkway is listed on the top 10 of the scariest walkways in the world. So anyway, that's a little side note. Glad I knew that now that I'm here in the United States. I learned some things about faith. And I remember writing this down after my experience of when I was in Ghana. And these were 3 things I learned about faith. One is it takes faith to believe that the ropes will hold you. 2, that these series of bridges that take you out into the forest will eventually get you back to solid ground. And 3, this is important. Others have walked there before. And the bridge held them, and this is more important, they didn't die. And because of that, and believing that in my fear of heights, that takes faith, that takes a sense of hope that I would not die as well. A few years back, we were living up in Shetland, and we had to get here to Scottsbluff. Our daughter Olivia had broken her arm, and it was a very severe break. And so when we had to get her back here to Scottsbluff because this hospital was equipped with taking out the pins that was really holding her arm together at that point. And when we left Shetland on a Wednesday night, it was snowing, and when we got to the top of the table, it was very different. Now, those of you that are familiar with the geography of what the locals call the table, it is this, if you're ever traveling south of Shetland, it is this flat area, there's no trees, it is right before you get to the Pine Ridge Forest. And what that means is you get the full force of everything that is coming from Wyoming. So I want you to think of the wind that we had yesterday and just add snow. So we drove from snow and we got on the table and it was complete whiteout conditions. Now, at that point, I was committed that we were going to go forward. And we'd already gone that far. Olivia had scheduled surgery. By golly, I was going to get her to Scottsbluff. And I had a couple things going for me. One was those markers that you find on the road. Every time that I hit one of those markers, I kept thinking, okay, I'm getting a little bit forward, a little bit forward, a little bit forward. Next was the grass. I could kind of tell, okay, I'm driving on the grass. I better get onto the highway. But probably the most important part was that there was a set of tracks in front of us. Now, I can't imagine anyone else being on the road that night as well, but I'll tell you what, that saved us. I followed those tracks to the point where if those tracks would have gone in the ditch, I probably would have fallen in the ditch as well. But it was almost like a guardian angel was guiding us to move forward to Scottsbluff, or at least guiding them, which then guided us to move forward. It reminds me of a story I heard once about out of World War II. There seems to be, there was a platoon that ended in a minefield. Now, they couldn't go back. The enemy was right there. But as they were in this minefield, they just had to go forward. And so the head of the platoon said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Is one person's going to go ahead and is going to walk through that minefield. And then if something happens to them, then the number 2 guy is going to go. And then so on, and then until the number 3 guy, until everyone from the platoon is able to walk in those footsteps all the way through the minefield. The platoon knew it was a good idea because they saw the enemy quite behind them. They had to get through. But of course, who was going to be the leader? The platoon leader said, okay, it is my plan. I am the leader. I will go forward. And as the story goes, he put one foot in front of the other. He continued to walk very carefully through the minefield with the next person right behind him, following very closely in the exact same footsteps, all moving forward. And as the story goes, they all were able to get out of the minefield. Now, I've never been in war. I've never been in a battle. But I've certainly had those moments when all I had to do was just put my foot right in front of the other and grab that rope bridge and go forward. And believe this was the path that God had set out for me. I want you to think about that as we watch our next clip from the movie. I love that scene. Possibly. For that boy, he knows those words could mean disappointment. I mean, just think of what he has seen. He has watched his parents fight. He has seen his dad change jobs. He has seen them move out of their apartment. And I'm sure he has been disappointed with that phrase before. But in the innocence of a child, for only a child can cling to hope, that one word, possibly, is a bridge to something better. Let's watch the next clip in this movie. Have you ever had a moment like that where the word possibly bridged you to hope? Maybe it was a job offer, or a phone call that changed your life, or a moment when you said yes, or I do, or when the doctor actually gave you good results, or a time when you felt confidence to walk across that bridge, and you knew life would get better. Now, this part in his life is called internship, and many of you have been in small businesses. You're very familiar with the idea of an internship. Maybe you have been an intern yourself. You know that the pay is not good, if there is pay at all. You know the work is hard, but there is a payoff in the end. If you work at it, if you make a good impression, you believe that it will actually lead to something. That's the bridge that takes you from possibly to probably to something better. Now, it's going to take time, and there will be effort in there. But if you're continuing to put one foot in front of the other, one arm holding that rope over the other, you believe it's going to lead you forward. It's going to lead you to hope. Listen to how he describes this part in his life in his book. Unbeknownst to me, I was fine-tuning the ability to move frequently, even constantly, unaware of how critical these skills were going to become. With the suit I wore on my back, with the other one on a hanger in the garment bag slung over my shoulder, a few toiletries and my books, I was self-contained. Rather than leave my stuff at anyone's house, I got in the habit of keeping everything with me. Then he writes this after they lost the hotel room. There was no backup plan, no safety net, nobody needing me to succeed, to make themselves look good. This was all on me. If I needed to sleep under the desk, then that's what I would do. You know, when I read this gospel passage, it reminds me of taking the bridge to Christ. And it's not an easy road. It's hard work. You might want to turn around. You might say to yourself, you know, this discipleship business is not for me. I got other things to do. But like any internship or bridge that we cross, if we take the path to Christ, we will be heading to something better. That is hope. Not possibly, not probably, but hope. That it will be, that it will happen. Tony Campolo tells a great story about heaven. And in this story, St. Peter is handling the admissions there at the pearly gates. And Paul is handling all the administrations of the census. And as Paul continues to count all of the heads, he realizes that it's not adding up to the number of people that Peter is allowed into heaven. Until one day he figures it out. And he comes running and goes, Peter, I figured it out. I know why there's so many people. It's Jesus. Jesus keeps sneaking people over the wall. My friends, that's more than possible. That's more than probably. That is hope. Jesus is the bridge that is pushing people over the wall. It's making us believe that it will get better. We're going to watch one more clip from the Next week, the lesson is called Paying Taxes. Now, right now, as you're watching this, you're thinking, wow, things are looking up for him. But next week, unfortunately, things do not. I want to tell you a little caveat about next week. Next week, you're going to see a guy by the name of Cecil Williams. He's the pastor of Glide Memorial United Methodist Church. And he specifically came out of retirement to act in this movie because of the relationship that he has with Chris Gardner. And what I want to talk about is when I was in Chadron, I had an intern that worked with me. Her name was Angie. And after she graduated from Chadron State, she went to San Francisco. And she started interning at Glide Memorial United Methodist Church. And she got me one of Cecil Williams' books. And of course, the title of the book is Beyond Possible. So the connection is there. So one of the things you're going to find, yes, you have to pay taxes. I know that we're in the tax season right now, and things may look really, really bad. But Cecil Williams came out of retirement to preach the sermon that you're going to see next week in the sermon because of the importance that Chris Gardner gave for the church and also the message that needs to be done. Internship, right in the midst of that. And sometimes you got to get that bridge and you got to cross that bridge to go to something better.